Hello, everybody. Howard Cooper here, and I've got to tell you, this is, by the way, the tonight's or the YouTube live Beat Anxiety live stream for May 24. If you'd have seen me 15 minutes ago, you would have seen someone very calm, ready to head to the office, ready to get the gear that I have, the microphone setup that I have at the office, ready for this YouTube live. And then I drive all the way there, giving a good 10 minutes, of course, to get ready like I normally do, and then realize I've left my wallet and my keys, so I cannot get in. So I race home, and now I've pulled out this webcam. This is my phone webcam. I'm now doing this from home. I've got a different audio setup. I have no idea whether you can see and hear me right now. So if you can, you must forgive the fact that I'm probably a little bit flustered right now, but this kind of happens sometimes. And let me know in the comments, if you're watching, whether you can see and hear me all right. That would be helpful. Otherwise, it's really just me talking to myself for however long. If this is your first time here, often I structure these and we have, like a technique of the week, and we have an Howard Rants, a little section like that. However, the difference this time is I sometimes get lots and lots of questions that come in through my YouTube channel, and I never have time to reply fully in the comments. Sometimes, oh, thank you, Charlotte. I'm pleased that you can see and hear me. Sometimes what happens is people are, they write as we go through this, various questions, and we run out of time to answer them. So just a heads up, I have allocated about an hour for tonight. Might be shorter, but it won't run over. And really, this is going to be led by you. I've got a few preloaded questions because I went through the YouTube channel in all the comments to see what are the general themes that people are asking. And I've pulled out a few key ones. But as you are here right now, if you have any anxiety issues or you'd like some help overcoming something, or you'd like my take on something, please do let me know in the comments, and I will obviously do my best to come to it at some point. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an ex-anxiety sufferer. I spent 3.5 years in traditional therapy, and it didn't work for me. What I got was my therapist's theory as to why I was like I was, but no real practical solutions. And I don't know about you, but I never really cared why I was like I was. I just wanted to essentially become free from anxiety. And the reason I think people so often harp on about finding like a root cause and trying to find and uncover why am I like this is not because they really want to know. It's because they want to be free of suffering, and they see that as the solution. But I think if you didn't need to find out, or there were ways of overcoming anxiety without ever having to delve back into the past, I think most people would be pretty open to that. In fact, it would be welcome. So, if you have any questions as we go through, let me know. By the way, I notice often when people join live or they watch the replays of these, there are a lot of people that do this. They're not subscribers of mine, which means they don't get notified when new videos are coming out. And one of the things that allows me to realistically justify spending time putting out content like this and spending my evenings once a month doing this is because it helps spread the message out there. So you can be part of that. If you're watching live right now, just click share, just click like. What that does is it tells YouTube that this is content that's worth showing up in all the searches and the algorithms, and that would be really appreciated. The more you do the hearts, the likes, the thumbs up. I hate saying it, but you know what? I got to play the game because that's how we can get all this stuff out. So that would be appreciated. Okay, let's dive in. It's time for questions. And I don't know who's joining in. I had a rumor that someone by the name of James might be joining in, only because he wants to see me have a rant about something personal development-y. I'm sure that will come. It inevitably does on every session I do of these. So let's dive in. The first question I would like to throw up for discussion is, where is it? There we go. Do other people ever get a feeling of impending doom? And if so, how do you deal with it? Well, I think a lot of people often have a feeling of impending doom. I think it's one of the things that comes up quite often in the work that I do, working with people with anxiety. And I think there's some illusions behind the thinking. But let me know, if you're watching live, do you ever get a feeling of impending doom? Is that something that you resonate with? Or is this the person that asked this question under one of my videos talking at his arse? Is that just a thing that he has? But I think people do have it. And one of the things I would suggest is when people talk about a sense of impending doom, they're often kind of implying, in other words, that it's the future that's making me feel this way, as though the feeling inside of impending doom is telling them about something catastrophic that's going to happen in the future. And a lot of anxiety works that way, whether it's imagining a future scenario and catastrophizing, or whether it's saying what if statements to yourself that are all future oriented. We can also do this about a feeling. I have a feeling something bad's going to happen. And I think it's really interesting to realize that what do feelings actually tell us? The only thing feelings actually tell us is what story have we become absorbed into. I think I said story. I've never done that in my life before. Story. I must enunciate. What story have we got absorbed into? And I remember, if we go back to 2019, in December time, I have lost count of the number of times I saw people holding up their phones on social media going, "Hi guys, just to let you know, it's the December 2019. What a shit year that's been. Brexit, economic struggles, difficulties. But you know what? The year is nearly behind us. And I'm feeling really excited about 2020. I really feel like 2020 is going to be so positive. It's going to be such an amazing year." Well, if you said to them, like, is that a real feeling that you have right now of positivity? They would likely say, well, yeah, I really feel positive about it. In other words, they have an impending sense of positivity about 2020. Well, what did that very real feeling tell them about? Did it tell them about what would actually happen in 2020? No, absolutely not. What it actually told them was the flavour of thinking that their thoughts were taking in that moment. So if they're imagining 2020 being the land and the year of marshmallow dreams and rainbow smiles, then guess what? They're going to have a real feeling of positivity. And then because they get a real feeling of positivity, they then likely loop back into, it's going to be, look, I'm getting really absorbed into these thoughts. It really is going to be that way. And so they go round and round and round that way. And I think that is where impending positivity comes from in that example. But guess what? Impending doom also comes from the same thing. And a really interesting exercise to try, if ever you have that impending sense of doom, is to ask yourself, when am I? When am I? Because the answer can only ever be one thing. I'm now. Is this feeling inside, however unpleasant, is it actually the future? Or is it just a sensation that I have right now in this moment? Because if you can see that it's just a sensation that you have right now in this moment, and it isn't the future and doesn't tell you anything about the future, then the question then becomes, well, could you be willing to have it? And if you're familiar with the work that I do and the angle that I take on a lot of this stuff, it's to begin to move towards, well, if I can accept this feeling, then what I'm really doing is telling myself unconsciously that it's not a threat. And so your body stops responding to it with that threat response. So that's what I would say to that. And we've got a question that's popped up here from Charlotte. Here we go. Oh, look at that. Oh, there we go. Charlotte, thanks for the question. Why do you think we worry about something that could happen in the future? I often ask, why worry about something that hasn't happened? Okay, that is a great question. Here's an interesting thought for you. I have read lots and lots of books on anxiety. I've seen lots of literature about it. And I've started telling people that I know whether a book is a good book on anxiety if it doesn't, I repeat, does not have a chapter at the beginning of it, or a special chapter called Anticipatory Anxiety. And I don't know if you've come across this term, anticipatory anxiety. I hear some people talk about, you have anticipatory anxiety. It's the anxiety of things that are yet to come. Well, be honest, if you opened a recipe book or a book on how to cook, and there was a special chapter at the beginning that was called Edible Food, I think you'd put that book down and go, yeah, this doesn't seem like a great book, because what the hell else are all the other chapters about? Surely the point is, food is edible. All anxiety is anticipatory. It's always about the future. And essentially, you have to think of it like this. Right? Deep down, we want to survive. We have survived. We are wired up where we are always scouting for danger, and we have prediction software. So it's kind of looking ahead and trying to figure out, is there something threatening that I need to be aware of or need to pay attention to? That's it. And it's not really a choice. You know, these are patterns that were developed when we were hunter-gatherers, you know, and they would protect us from, guess what? You know, if Bob the caveman had been mauled to death by a saber-toothed tiger, and then a week later we see something that looks a bit like a saber-toothed tiger coming towards us, probably good for us to have a prediction in our mind that goes, let's not take any chances. Let's have anxiety, let's have fight or flight and fall or freeze so that we can take action, so that we can stay safe. It's very simple. And likely, the people that played it safe in terms of saber-toothed tiger, they're the ones that procreated and ended up passing that genetic neurological predisposition to move away from danger. The people that perhaps did not move away from danger, they're the ones that got eaten, and they didn't therefore pass on their genetic code to the next generation. So I think it's not really, often we can go, well, we can kind of beat ourselves up. Why should I worry about that? Why should I do that? Why would I? Well, I think there's an element of anxiety is always a part and parcel of everyday life. You know, if you actually think about, you know, crossing the road, there'll be a split second as you're about to cross the road that you have a moment where you flicker in your mind, like crashing, or a car crashing into you, and that's how you know just to stay back. I think the problem with anxiety comes from, and I think I said this, I can't remember when I've said this on various public occasions, but I think people often think that anxiety is the answer to the question, is there a threat? I'll say that again. People often think that anxiety is the answer to the question, is there a threat? But I don't think it is. I think anxiety is the question, is there a threat? In other words, the feeling of anxiety, or just a little feeling, is that thing that reminds us to just go, right, is there anything actually I need to pay attention to so I can cross the road safely or get out the way of the saber-toothed tiger? And if there is, great, let's act on it. And if there isn't, okay, we don't have to turn this into suffering with anxiety. We can just move on, and then naturally, the natural process is it just fades away. I think suffering from anxiety comes out when we start labeling this as problematic. I mustn't have it. Why do I keep having this? And then the whole thing gets out of hand. So that was a bit of a waffle, but I hope that kind of answers your question. And I hope you got something of value from that one. Edita, oh, good to see you, Edita. Nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, Howard. Nice to see you again. Yes, likewise. Anxiety that's become cyclical in relationship with partner, which has become a vicious cycle in that things are triggering and anticipation makes it worse. Yeah. You know, look, we all have relationships, do we not, where, you know, we get into patterns of behavior whereby we think we kind of know how the other person's going to respond. And before they even respond that way, we're already acting and behaving as though they've responded that way. And interestingly enough, what happens is that when we start then reacting like they've already behaved a certain way, it likely fosters the pattern where they then do, because they're picking up on our response. Now, here's the thing. We can't change anyone else. We can't change the way other people are. But what stacks the odds in our favour? Well, I think beginning to realise that the thinking, it's never the other person themselves that's causing the problem. It's the meaning we make and we take from it. You know, so if people are making silly comments and you don't like it, it's not the silly comment itself that's the problem. It's that likely you are adding a story to that silly comment where, what does it mean? What if they never stop saying that? Think about all the times in the past when they've said that and it's upset me. And so instead of just being present with what's happening, we add all sorts of baggage labelled past and labelled future. And we start having a lot of past and future suffering in response to something that may or may not be actually occurring. Now, I know this seems a bit glib, and this is the sort of stuff that actually, without tangible examples, without really kind of helping you see what illusions you're falling for, it's kind of hard. So yes, sometimes these responses are going to be a little bit pithy, as it were. But hopefully that begins to get you thinking or reminds you of some of the things that are useful to focus in on at this moment. Let me close that down. Monica. Hello, Monica. What are your thoughts on air hunger and being hyper-awareness of your own breathing and automatic body functions? Thank you. Oh, wow. You've opened a can of worms now. Monica, I guess you saw a video that I did on YouTube a little while ago, and it's been one of my biggest YouTube videos on something that we call air hunger. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's something that anxiety sufferers seem to suffer from a lot. It's quite common, and it's the feeling that however much you breathe, you can't take a satiating breath in. And I suffered with it terribly a long time ago. During my anxiety phase, and it was really awful. I was having ECGs and lung function tests because it really feels, however much you take a breath, it feels like you're suffocating. It's really, really unpleasant. In fact, I would argue it's one of the most scary, unpleasant things. And what makes it worse is that you go to the doctors and they just say it's just anxiety. I even remember going to one consultant, a top respiratory consultant, after having all the lung function tests that were clear and the ECGs that were clear, and I kept saying, I feel like I can't breathe. And eventually, after feeling like I'd been fobbed off by lots and lots of people, he leaned forward and he said, well, young man, I think I understand the issue, and I have the solution. And he leant forward. And finally, there was someone that even promised a solution. And I just thought, oh, wow, this is going to be brilliant. What's this going to be? And I leant forward, waiting to receive the gold that was about to pour from his medical, marvellous mouth. I think what you need to sort this problem out is to get a hobby. I have never wanted to punch someone so much as that moment. Get a fucking hobby. Like, as though that would be the answer. But here's the thing. It feels so awful. And there are actually two things, because I'm not unsympathetic to the idea that it's just anxiety, because here's what's actually happening. With anxiety, we tend to increase respiration rate. Why? Because saber-toothed tiger is running towards us. We want to have more breath going in and out so that we've got the energy to run away quickly. But if you have low levels of anxiety pretty much all the time and you have some chronic breathing dysfunctional patterns, maybe you're breathing out your mouth, which increases the odds that you're going to overbreathe, you're actually getting rid of too much carbon dioxide, which has an acidic effect in the bloodstream. So your blood starts to become too alkaline, and there are pH balancing mechanisms that occur to kind of balance it all out. This mechanism and this pH balancing stuff, if you're overbreathing a lot, ends up having the result that you become hypersensitive to carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. So air breathing a normal amount is going to begin to feel like you're suffocating, which is really, really awful, especially because how would you feel if you suddenly feel like you're suffocating? Probably anxious. So you get anxious, you increases your breath, respiration increases because you're anxious, which means that you keep overbreathing, and the whole thing becomes a cycle. That's the problem. So going back now to Monica Musco's question, really about what are my thoughts about hyper awareness? I call it hyperfixation because a lot of people they become hyperfixated on their breathing. They feel like they're not breathing automatically. They have to constantly pay attention to it. And what they want is they look at people who are breathing fine and they're like, how do you do that? You're not even thinking about your breathing, are you? How do you do that? But this is no different from a threat response. My guess is if you walked into a room and there was a tiger, a real tiger prowling around, and someone said, why do you keep paying attention to the tiger that's prowling around? It's a pretty easy question to answer. You'd go, because it's a tiger and it's dangerous, it's a threat. And that's it. Whereas, look, when people come and see me face to face at my office, sometimes I walk them down the corridor and I'll sometimes say to them, by the way, in the reception area, what colour was the rug? They never remember. Why? Why did they filter it out? Because it's not a threat. They're not paying attention to it. But anything that's a threat, we're going to hyper-fixate on. And one of the real challenges and why it occurs is because if you spent a lot of time suffocating and constantly scanning internally for your body functions to check, are they working, are they okay? And people with health anxiety have this a lot too. The constant internal reflection and checking, am I okay? Then what happens is we get more anxious about it. Because we get more anxious about it, we notice it more. And because we notice it more, we then inevitably start going, I mustn't think about it. I have to distract myself. And the age-old analogy I always use is if my son came running into my bedroom and said, Daddy, there's a monster under my bed, be honest, how effectively would it help him if I said, George, there's no monster, but whatever you do, do not look it in the eyes. At that moment of saying, don't look at it, it would be like putting a massive red flag in that thought of monster. And so likely the last thing he's going to be able to do is to let the thought monster filter away. You could say he'd then be hyperfixating about monster thoughts. So that's the mechanism. That's the mechanism. And as always, whether it's health anxiety or hyperfixating on any other things, whether it's intrusive thoughts or the solution to hyperfixating is to do the work around the sensations, the images and the words around these issues that you've been hyperfixating on, and work on beginning to see that they're just thoughts and that you don't have to get rid of them in order to stay safe because they pose no threat. Now that's something that sounds glib as I say it now, but there are ways of guiding people through those mechanisms, whether it's through online programs that I do or when people do one-on-one work or they go and see any therapist. There's ways in which you can help people navigate the diffusion or helping people see that just because they have the thought, they don't have to have the feeling. And that's really when you begin to put people on the path of getting rid of hyperfixation. So I hope that helps. Linda, says, "Hi Howard, it's lovely to see you again." Oh yes, I remember you. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Good to have you here. Let's have a look, because there's no other live questions here. So there's another question here that I thought I would like to dive into. Where is it? It's this. Here we go. Bing! There we go. I'm going to try and make it bigger. So, oh no. Oh, too big. There we go. Hopefully you can all read that. I feel like I don't have anxiety. Listen to this. I feel like I don't have anxiety. I have nothing to be anxious about. But I have lots of anxiety-related symptoms that I need to get rid of. Can you help? Look, this was a comment that came up under one of my YouTube videos, and it made me giggle a little bit. And I don't mean to undermine the suffering that people have around this, because look, people have all sorts of anxieties, but I'll tell you my thoughts and the reason why I wanted to share this with you. So often people will say to me things like, they'll book a session, they'll come and see me, they have all these weird and wonderful sensations, whether it's clammy hands, racing heart, palpitations, dicky tummy. Oh man. And they'll say, "Howard, your job is you have to help me get rid of these terrible symptoms I'm having." And I go, "Well, you know, what do you get anxious about?" And they go, "I have nothing to be anxious about, and I don't really feel anxious." And I've heard this quite a few times, and there's two things I'd like to flag up about, which I think are useful and valuable things to focus in on. Number one is, if anyone ever says to me something like, "I feel like I don't have anxiety and I have nothing to be anxious about," there's often a sense of self-rating themselves. I've had a lot of people who have been high achievers. They've done a huge amount of amazing stuff in their life. They've created businesses. They're financially well off. They've got families. They've on paper, they've got all of these like checklists of succeeding in life ticked off. And they kind of go, "Well, you know, so I've got nothing to be anxious about." And there's a sense of berating themselves or self-rating themselves as, "So why on earth should I be suffering? I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be, because look at all this stuff I should be grateful for." Now, the reality of it is, however much you've succeeded or ticked off or haven't ticked off on your list of "I'm a successful human being," you're still a human being. And the nature of being human is that we have patterns of survival, as we talked about earlier, where things will come up that will test us. And I think being kind to ourselves into the fact that it's normal to feel anxious from time to time and have stresses and have strains is a useful thing to reflect on. I really hate it when people come and see me and they say things to me like, "Howard, you have to help me get rid of all anxiety forever." No, that's ridiculous. We don't want to help people get rid of all anxiety forever. That's not achievable, nor is it useful, right? Nor is it useful. Because deep down you have this need to survive. Why do we want to get rid of that? But it's about not suffering with anxiety, right? I was on I hope you're listening, James, because I can feel it brewing now. I can feel it brewing, my personal development rant. I was on a 3-day conference a few days ago, and it was not a psychology anxiety course, it was a business-related thing. And I do get a little bit irritated when people in the business world, they've set up good businesses, they've been successful in one sphere in their life, but now they think that means that now magically they are experts in psychology or mindset. Why? Because they've been lucky in business, or they've done. So it's not that they have no value, but sometimes they don't half make up a lot of bullshit. And one gentleman who came up and took to the stage, there's 500, 600 people in the room, starts talking about like how we create reality. And it was just the biggest pile of bullshit I think I've ever seen, culminating in, see if you can figure this sentence out. He said, deep down, we have a need to survive. And some part of you is always scouting for danger and to figure out, how it can best keep you safe. And so far, by the way, just to let you know, I'm on board. I'm nodding away again. Oh yeah, I kind of think that too. That's borne out in the work that I've done as well. And then he went further. So, you need to make a daily practice of trying to heal from your addiction to survival. I'll say that again. You have to make a daily habit of doing your best to heal from your unconscious need to survive. And I'll be honest, as he said that, I thought to myself, I really hope that this gentleman who's speaking right now does, in fact, heal his addiction to survive, because then I won't have to hear this rubbish. I must also confess, I can't help myself. I'm feeling, because I'm at home, I feel comfortable. And maybe I'm ranting a bit more than I should, but screw it. He then starts veering into talk about the law of attraction and manifestation and getting a vision board, because when you think it, it becomes a reality. And I couldn't help myself as he starts talking about that. I sort of just did this this voice that went, oh God, here we go. Ugh. And the person next to me said, oh, you're not a big fan of the law of attraction? You're not a believer? And I couldn't help myself. I just said to him, I said, well, I'm definitely not a believer. I know it doesn't work, because for the whole time I've been sitting here, I've been hoping this dude's going to say something intelligent. Anyway, sorry. Sorry. And calm. I think going back to the question here, though, I feel like I don't have anxiety and I have nothing to be anxious about. But I also have lots of anxiety-related symptoms. I think it's simply this point of saying, look, sometimes people have this idea that anxiety is when you just feel nervous and you have like worst case thinking in your head. And if they don't have that nervous butterflies feeling, and they don't have these like horrible kind of, what if scenarios going round in their mind, that means they're not anxious. But I'm here to say that sometimes we can have lots of anxiety-related symptoms. They are anxiety, but it just doesn't fall into that category of nervousness. So, whether it's air hunger and sensations that you can't breathe, whether it's often gastric stuff that's going on, acid reflux, people can have tension, globus hystericus is the term, where you feel like you've got a lump in your throat. These are all very well known physical manifestations to being in a slightly heightened state of tension. You might not know or have thinking that's very conscious with a nervous feeling, but that doesn't mean you're not having anxiety-related symptoms. So I think it was just that thing to say, well, look, not that I want people to start looking and attributing everything to anxiety, but to also open the mind that it's not just I'm feeling nervous, I think is the point. A couple of other questions have come in. Let's go back. David Bloom. Hello, David. Hi, Howard. How do you deal with phobic anxieties caused probably by child trauma? Okay. I've got a video that I did actually. It's my last full video called The Truth Behind Finding the Root Cause of Anxiety. And I am firmly of the belief that there isn't a single root cause. And I suggest that you go back, have a look at that video, and comment. Let me know what you think about it. I'd be curious as to your take on that and whether it sits. The way I like to look at this is by helping people, and it's the same with any trauma, which is to help people see that their response is not coming from the past. It's a response to the ongoing story they have about it in their mind. Because people, of course, are not experiencing the past itself. And I'll give you a really good example of this in action, so you can kind of see. It's often a story I tell if I'm working with clients. And it's a true story. I remember working with a lady, she was 75 years old. She walks in to see me, and the first thing she says to me is, "I know why I am like I am." And I said, "Okay, how come?" And she said, "It's Julie's fault." Then I said, "Okay, who's Julie?" And she said, "She told me I was fat." And I said, "When? Where?" She said, "In the playground at school." And I was genuinely trying to be helpful. I said, "Oh, was that recently when you were picking your grandkids up from school?" And, and she said, "No, when I was 8. You know, childhood trauma and all that. Right. I said, "Do you hear her tell you this often?" And she said, "I hear her all the time. I've even heard her since being in your office." At which point, I just couldn't help myself. I couldn't. I said, "You've heard her since being in my office? Awesome. We're going to sort this out once and for all." And I kid you not, I got my hands on my knees. I start looking around the office, opening the cupboards, opening the doors, opening the drawers. I go out in the corridor. I'm prowling around the whole time. I'm going, "Julie, Julie, you can come out now. Julie." I come back into the office. She's glaring at me with a look I don't think I will ever forget. Non-verbally, it was saying, "I'm paying for this," as well as, "I think this dude's crazier than I am." And at this point, she grabs me by the arm. And I love this so much. She grabs me by the arm. She looks me right in the eyes and she says, "Darling, darling, you do realize that she's not actually here, don't you?" At which point I took my glasses off and I just looked her bolt in the eyes and I said, "Do you know something?" I said, "I know that. I know that." And some part of her brain reorganized and realized it wasn't Julie herself. It wasn't the past. It was her creating and reconstructing a thought labeled Julie. And if you treat that thought as though it's really them, then you'll go and get a real feeling. And if you get the real feeling, you'll then feed it into, it really is her. But of course, it wasn't. And it kind of begins to break the cycle. So going back to your question, David, how I deal with phobic anxieties caused by child trauma, it's to begin to get people to be able to see what's happening, understand the reconstructive nature of memory, so that they can begin to experience these thoughts that pop up without them having to control it, without having that same visceral response. It's a bit like, if someone said to me, "If there's a tiger prowling around the room, how would you help someone?" Well, what if I could show them that it wasn't a real tiger, it was just a cardboard cutout of a tiger? That would change everything. So hopefully that gives you a kind of an idea as to how I would go and navigate that. But that's often different from people who use, certainly within the world of NLP and hypnosis, things like the fast phobia cure, which I have seen work. It's not that I throw all of this stuff out, I've seen it work in certain contexts with certain people, and there are frames in which it's useful. But go back, have a look at the Finding the Root Cause video. I'd be curious to see your take on it. Let's have a look. Who else? Jordan. There we go. That was the next one. "Hi, Howard. I've recently become very consciously aware of my breathing. Like it's the focus on my mind daily. I've started doing your breathing techniques for air hunger, but I'm wondering..." Oh, is there more to this? Oh, yes, it's a two-parter. "I'm wondering how to best tackle the psychological aspects of being sensitive to breathing." Jordan, I'm not sure if you were here earlier on this live. I kind of handled a lot of that thinking a little bit earlier. It came up in the conversation. So if you haven't, go back after this, watch the replay. There's stuff there. But essentially what we're pointing at is, if you can begin to see that the sensation itself is not a threat, that can be really valuable. It feels like a threat, and people will often say, especially with things like, focusing on their breathing because it feels like you're suffocating, well, of course it's a threat. But here's a really interesting question for anyone, by the way, not just with air hunger. If any of you have a sensation that feels threatening, ask yourself this question. If I had a magic button that whenever I press this magic button, whatever unpleasant feelings I have inside would just immediately turn off. If I had that magic button on me and I knew it always worked, how afraid of this sensation would I be? And my guess is in that scenario, you wouldn't be afraid of the sensation. You wouldn't be afraid of the sensation because you would know you could just turn it off. And in that sense, sensations aren't in and of themselves a threat. The threat is the story you add to the sensation. It's likely the story of what if it gets worse? What if I can't cope? What's the outcome going to be if I can't cope with this sensation? And so it's all the images and words you add to the sensation. It's not the sensation itself. And if you can, again, begin to see that and sit with an unpleasant sensation, because you're better able to detach yourself from its threat response, then what happens is you begin to stop paying attention to it as much. So hopefully, that kind of begins to set you off in the right path. Let's have a look here. Travis N. Hi Howard, is nervous system regulation necessary? It seems like it's heavily marketed now. Yeah, I mean, I've seen lots of stuff like this out. People talking about, breathing patterns to get the vagus nerve activated and to calm the parasympathetic nervous system, and so on and so forth, and yada, 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 yada. And it's become quite trendy. But I think this is actually a wider issue of just like the over-medicalization of normal things. Guess what? It's normal to feel kind of stressed and anxious and overwhelmed from time to time. But I don't like it when you see lots of people jumping on the bandwagon of, well, we need to have, and I've lost it now, the phrase, there you go. We need to have your nervous system regulation. Needs to be re-regulated. And for only $9.99 a month, you can have the 5 steps for nervous system regulation. You can master it. And if you buy now, you'll get a free set of steak knives. I think this is kind of implying to people that have ordinary everyday issues, there might be something wrong with my nervous system. I feel a little bit anxious. I feel a little bit worried. And you know what? This is a wider issue again, because I think we are living in an era whereby we are wiring children up and ourselves up to become afraid of any unpleasant sensation. And you know who I blame? You know who I blame? Sesame Street. I do. Okay, look, I'm not actually blaming Sesame Street. I use it as the poster child for children's TV. Because is it not true that when you're growing up and you're watching these sorts of things, as you're a kid, we're told by adults all sorts of nice platitudes, like, if sharing is caring. And if we all take time to listen to each other and really understand each other, we can all cooperate. And we can all get on famously, and we can all love each other and live in a land of marshmallow dreams and rainbow fucking smiles. But the truth is, we can't. Some people don't get on. Sometimes there's not a good fit. Sometimes we have different values. And I think what this does is we sort of over-idealize what life is like, and then we're told that we mustn't feel sad, we mustn't feel anxious, we mustn't feel, schools these days, crikey, like, you go to primary schools, and if a kid's feeling sad, they have a little safe space where you can take them to put them to the side because heaven help, you're feeling sad. Or, these days you've got kids come over to you and they go, I'm bored. And now parents immediately, quick! Woo, woo, woo! The alarm bell rings, the boredom bell has gone off. We must immediately take them to the park or occupy them or play games with them. And no! We don't. When did we become so afraid of letting people just feel normal human emotion? And I think this is part of the problem, which this kind of flags up for me, Travis. So, yeah, I think it's marketing, and I think it is likely implying to people that we all have dysregulated nervous systems. We don't. Our nervous systems are doing what they're supposed to do. They're being nervous systems. That's my take on that. Yeah, there we go. Any other questions? Because I'm beginning to what's the word? 2047. Let's see if we've got anything else in the. I can't find it now. Oh, there you go. Any other questions that I wanted to flag up today? Oh, by the way, you know when I just said like we're kind of training ourselves to have to never feel anything terrible. We mustn't. God forbid someone has to make you wait for something, and I kind of understand it because I find myself, reflecting from when I was young, and I used to be into magic, and I remember, saving up money at 13, 14, and I had a catalogue from a magic shop, and I would find which trick that I wanted to buy, and I'd have to write a check, and I'd have to, from my junior checking account, I'd have to put it in the envelope. My parents wouldn't give me a first-class stamp because, it's not important stuff. My magic hobby, is it? So I'd put a second-class stamp on it, and I'd have to wait 4 days before it got there, and then it would be like 2 weeks of processing. And then finally, 4 days later, another 4 days would go by. I've waited 3 weeks for this trick that I want. And I just had to learn to have that feeling of, I want it, but I can't have it. Right? We learn resilience. I remember having to, watching TV, and you've got 4 channels, and if the season that you want to watch the program ends for season 1, you're going to have to wait 2 years before you can see the next one, and you'd have to watch it week in, week out. You can't binge watch. But now I want something, I can order it like that on Amazon, and I get irritated if it's not next day delivery. And there are kids that are growing up in this environment where everything we are taught has to be instant. Instant, instant, instant. And it reminds me of a comment I wanted to show you from my YouTube video on air hunger, where, bearing in mind, it's had now 75,000 views plus. Thousands of comments, lots of really positive stuff. But someone posted the other day, and it really made me laugh. There we go. Bearing in mind, it is, and I will be honest, it's a whole 12-minute video on air hunger. No one's talking about this at all. Nobody. No one even knows about it. And finally, there's someone. I'm sitting there, I'm going, this is how it works. Let me explain the mechanisms. And someone posts this. I'm already halfway through. And you haven't shown me, in capitals, shown me what to do. Less explanation, more demonstrating. Because sorry that I took a whole 6 minutes to help people understand what this thing that they've been suffering from was before I dived into the explanation. I have no idea whether this person then carried on watching and got to the demonstration, but I thought this was hilarious. But isn't it kind of indicative of where we're at? I'm sorry, I'm used to TikToks where in 60 seconds people jump straight in, and if you haven't hooked me in 10 seconds, I don't want to know. It's not worth knowing. Well, there's a lovely book by a guy called Johann Hari. I've got it. I don't have it to hand. There we go. Called Stolen Focus. I thoroughly recommend. He's a New York Times journalist, and he's written various books. But this book, Stolen Focus, is fantastic. It talks about how essentially, through various things going on in society, we are robbing ourselves of the ability to focus. And yeah, I mean, this was reiterated when someone can't watch 6 minutes, before diving in and going, well, you just show me what to do. Why haven't you done? I think, we have a problem. So I think it's worth a read, and absolutely should dive in there. Let's have a look here. I love your take on the psychological aspect of the air hunger. I don't really fear the sensations anymore. I'm more concerned with the story that I've created about being consciously aware of it. Yes, and the more you challenge that, the better it will be, and the less it will impact. Good work, absolutely. And then he says perception is key, isn't it? Absolutely. And you know, in just the way that you can turn anything into something dangerous. And if you don't believe me, remind me to tell you at some point about the woman that came to see me who was terrified of frogs wearing clothes. If that's not a good example that you can take any idea and make it scary, I don't know what is. You know, but then you've also got things that, quite frankly, could genuinely be scary. I see videos of 18-year-olds doing parkour. You know, that's that thing where they like leap off buildings, and they like the genuinely dangerous stuff, and they seem to do it without like any fear at all. So absolutely, perception is the thing that makes the difference. That is absolutely for sure. James Brown. Now, James Brown is a jolly, lovely chap too. But he says, I think that's in reference to Johann Hari, the author of Stolen Focus, that he's a jolly, lovely chap too. James Brown, by the way, I was doing a training with James Brown last weekend. He's a wonderful hypnotist, a wonderful human being, great thinker. He's, I would say, a thought leader. If you ever get a chance to check out and see him in action, he's also one of the best magicians in the world, and pickpockets, entertainment pickpockets, and a very, very good friend. But by the way, it just reminded me now, and it's when he popped up and said, Johann Hari is a lovely chap too. Yeah, I was reading Stolen Focus, mesmerized by this book, and suddenly Johann talks about wanting to understand misdirection. And then he ends up chatting to a lovely guy called James Brown. And I was like, oh my God, my friend James Brown is in the book. So yes, that's how James knows him. There we go. Charlotte, I agree with you regarding instant life today. It can be adults are impatient for changes. I remind people about focus on one thing to enable change. It is a process. Oh, it's great tonight. Thank you. Oh, no, absolutely wonderful. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining. I hope, and I kind of feel like I'm rounding up now. It's kind of ran its course, but I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been valuable. As promised, I do these the last Thursday evening of every month. And today was a bit of an experiment because I did say that often I really prepare and I kind of go through and work out what's the structure. And sometimes I thought it would just be nice to let's just see what happens. Let's see if, just as we have a little conversation, what emerges. And hopefully I've enjoyed doing this, and it's been useful and shared some valuable stuff as well. So if you could all do me a favour, because the people that are live here right now, after we come off the air, under the YouTube video, there are comments, and for some reason I did not realise this, but the live comments, all the stuff that you've been saying, if you had any interesting insights like, that was great, thank you so much, that was useful, if you could repost those under the actual video of the replay, that will get the conversation started for anyone that watches after the fact. But yeah, listen, I've really thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you all soon.